So I'm going to try and tie a really quick steelhead fly. This is the pattern I'm going to go with right here. So it's got a lot of the things that you're generally looking for, which are size, weight, color, and wiggle, depending on what your water conditions that you're tying for. So I'm going to start off by using one of the 20 millimeter shanks here. Just going to stick this right in the vise. I'm going to try and make this a lot faster than some of the other tying videos I've done, just because they take forever. But same thing, just start with your thread base here. Do 210 denier just because it's a lot thicker, much stronger. And then I go with the 65-pound Power Pro also on this. You can go a lot lighter with trout flies, but I'm generally going to stick with some pretty heavy stuff just because of so it doesn't slip through any welded loops. And I'm going to keep the trailing loop here roughly around an inch to an inch and a half. I always use this thing right here as how far I know I need to be. Pretty easy. But I'm going to get this set once I got it to where I want it to be. Slip that guy right back through the eye there and then go ahead and wrap forward. Just make sure it's down tight. It doesn't have to be perfect now because there's going to be a lot of material going over it. But this fly right now, like I said, I'm going to put a decent amount of weight on it. This fly is going to be for getting in some nooks and crannies. So, because I do a lot of different stuff when it comes to, fly weights, because I want to have some really heavy stuff and then I want to have a lot of unweighted patterns too, just in case I've got to get more to the inside or if I'm fishing really shallow stuff. Next thing, just to go with it, I'm going to put my lead eyes on right here. They're just smalls, 3/16. And black, you can go straight, just straight lead. You can do whatever you want pretty much, but this is just to give you the basic function of the steps we're going to do with this fly. So I'll get this guy tied in here real quick. So once we're all the way back here, I'm just going to go with, you can choose from a bunch of different types of diamond braid, but I'm just going to go with blue here. Cut off a little bit. And this is just to cover the back end of the fly, because we're just going to, this fly is just going to be pretty much a single station fly with some saddle hackles to give it some wiggle, and then a little bit of shine, which is our flashaboo. But go ahead and wrap this guy forward, and then you can wrap it forward all the way to where the wire comes back together right here. So you're just going to wrap forward to about right, I would say right about there is probably pretty good. So. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some glow bug yarn, which is really cheap. And I use this for a lot of different stuff. And, it comes in a bunch of different colors. But these generally are going to be the main three that I use. Especially the cerise color. It seems to be a really, it's one of my favorites. For some reason, it just sticks out. And it also makes a really good prop for our shoulder. So you're going to cut off roughly around an inch of this stuff right here. You're going to just lay it right over the top and then go around it like I would say 4 or 5 times really hard, and then pull this whole front back again, just like that. And then once you've wrapped forward a little bit, or you got that going, go ahead and take this, and you're going to want to trim this down a little bit, because see how you got a lot of material on there. It probably won't sink near as easy, so we're going to cut this down about halfway, because like I said, we just want a little bit of a ball. So the material's pretty cheap. Then go ahead and fluff that down and back again, and that's going to prop up our shoulder. Then I'm going to just put in some anadromous brush. This is just going to give us a little more flash, but this is just pearl anadromous brush here, and I'm going to just wrap this forward, and this is going to give us, it's going to make that yarn kind of it's going to have like a translucent look to it, so we're still going to have some shine just forward of it. And the wire, this stuff looks great. I don't use it a lot, but sometimes I'll just cut it off and throw it in a dubbing loop. But I'm going to go around probably just 2 times here on that one. This stuff trimmed up nice. Alright. Just so there's not any that got stuck in here, you can take your whip finisher and just pick out any extra materials that got stuck in while you're wrapping forward. Alright. Next thing, I'm going to go with some Amherst. And I'm not going to put any of this in a loop. All I'm going to do is take out a solid chunk of it here. Let's see. And then I'm just going to lay it right over the top and cinch it down. This way we just have a bit of a spring on the shoulder just going up on the front end here. But you still want to take your fingernail or a brush and then just go through this just a little bit so all the materials don't stick together. I'm sure you've seen this on a couple previous videos or any Jerry French videos, but you can pretty much take your fingernail and then just get all those little fibers kind of mixed up there. But I'm going to take this, and then I'm pretty much just going to lay it right over the top, and then make sure there's plenty of tag end, and you can pull this out and then make it any length you want. But I just want to get this cinched on top first. Just like that, and then I'm going to go one more, and then you can get it straight, and then you can get it so if you want it longer, just pull this back just like so, and then I'm going to go ahead and cinch down, and then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of spread these guys out a little bit too, and then I'll cinch it down again. And then the tighter you wrap, the more these things should splay up like this. Okay, should look like a porcupine almost. But get these kind of spread out, then pull it back, then just give it a little bit more of a cinch. Okay. We'll go ahead and trim this guy. Okay. Next thing. Just gonna go with some navy ostrich, and with this I am gonna wrap this, so I'm gonna do just a quick little dubbing loop here on this one. This is just gonna give us a little more length and just a little more whip, and it's just gonna add to the saddles we throw in here too. Generally, when you do this, you can, everybody's different, but you can do this to your liking, whether you want it really thick or you want it kind of wispy. But I would try and do this to where you go around either 1 or 2 times max, depending on how thick or how much ostrich you want in this. Same thing, bring this thing all the way up to the top and then spin it just a couple times just so you tighten down the thread. That way you can adjust it. So there we go, that's ready to go. So I'm pretty much like that length there, so all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move it up. I'm just going to spread it out just a little bit, and then holding tension or pulling down here is going to keep that thread cinched in, and it's going to keep your material set in there. And then I'm just going to trim the tag ends here just a little bit, not a lot of it. Okay, spin to win. Again, I'm going to use this right here as kind of a blocker for, you know, any of that anadromous brush, because the anadromous brush is going to get caught up in there. You know, you can go away from that by keeping your ostrich down a little bit in the loop, but for the most part, I just don't like to wrap a bunch of thread on the shank for the most part. You can do a little bit just to get it lined up properly, but for the most part, I like to keep it cinched up right next to the shank. I grabbed that coffee cup on the table there. It's got my water.
Not this one.
Yep, it's right up there. I was gonna.
Oh, this one.
Yep, that one right there. I was gonna spit all over this fly, but I'd rather not. Thank you kindly. Same thing. Pull that back, and if they still want to stick up, just give it a little pinch on the back side of the thread here. Just go ahead and wrap this forward. And this should be just enough to go around one time perfectly, which it does. Go ahead and cinch that down. All right. Next, let's do some saddles next. Right here, this one right here is fresh out, so pretty much gonna take one from either side here. I just want to find some with some nice tips. You start whittling these things down, they definitely become harder to find, but grab one off the right and one off the left here. Then I'm just going to get this first one lined up kind of how I want it as far as length. And I'm just going to make sure this one, or the tips of this go roughly around 1/2 inch to 1 inch past your ostrich here, okay? So as soon as I line it up kind of where I want it to be, I'm just going to take this and then I'm going to peel it right here. And you can even pull all the material back just so you give yourself a little room. Then I'm going to drop this one in and do a very light cinching. Okay, there's that one. Then same thing with this one, but just make sure you line them up. And you can do this like you do with your ostrich, where you can tie it in long and then you can adjust it afterwards. It's really annoying when you tie a fly and you figure out that some of your stuff doesn't line up, so it won't ride properly and it looks funny. Okay, that's the set I'm looking for right there. These things have a tendency to twist up on you. So I'm just gonna get it seated where I want it to be here. And see, I generally check right at the back end here. You can generally see which one's longer. So this one right here on this side's a little bit longer, so I'm just gonna give that a little bit of a pull. One more time, and we're in there like swimwear. Okay. So now, since we're good, we're gonna just give it a little more of a cinch down. That way they stay in place. And then go ahead and trim these guys here. Okay. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do some flash blue. Same color, it's navy blue. This stuff sticks out like a really, really bright light. Because you got a bunch of different types of shine here. I mean, you got your flashaboos, you got your mirrored flash. Just depends on how much attractiveness you want to this fly, or how far away you want your fish to see this thing. But I generally add a lot more flash to flies that I'm going to be putting in some dirty water. But this fly right here, this fly is going to be getting used on the soul duck. It's going to be a good color. And I'm just doing 3 strands per side pretty much. That gives me enough coverage. So same thing this side, go ahead and just tie this in lightly. Make sure it's lined up, and then you can spread them out. So once they're in there, go ahead and just spread them out just a little bit so you get a little more coverage. And then once they're spread out, go ahead and cinch down. So right there, we're good. Give it more of a cinch. All right. And last but not least, marabou. And marabou can be kind of a mystery. That's why I like these, this stuff that's meant for this bay marabous here, because some of the marabou you buy, the feathers are pretty small. Half of them will be pretty fuzzy, and there won't be a lot of really nice tips. So with these ones, I find that they're much more quality marabou. And the thing, what I like about marabou, like, it's cheap, it's easy to tie with, get a lot of coverage out of it. You can mark it if you want to, or you can leave it as is. You can stack it. You can do, you can throw it in a dubbing loop or a composite loop, whichever you prefer, or you can do 2 feathers at once with numerous colors, to give a popsicle look to it. Same thing, go ahead and wet your fingers. I want to make sure this thing's really tight down. Sometimes you'll pull this thing right out, especially if you tie it in from the front there. So same thing, go ahead and dip your fingers in there, and then go ahead and start wrapping this guy. And sometimes, like, I'll do 2 feathers. If I don't think 1 feather's enough, if I want to get a little more bulk, I'll just go ahead and do that. Or you can add a separate color, whichever you prefer. There's no, you can make whatever fly you want it to be, with every pet or with any color you want, any color combination. This is just giving you the groundwork for it. Okay, so once that's kind of cinched in, make sure this thing is pretty tight in there, and then you can go ahead and clip that. Okay. Then I'm just going to cinch around the eyes a couple more times just to make sure everything's locked in right. Go ahead and whip it. Then you can either leave it plain as is, or you can bar it with a Sharpie here, which is I'm going to do just to give it a little more contrast. So I'm going to take all the marabous, at least the marabou that I tied kind of on the top here, and just kind of separate it from the fly itself. Then just pull it all the way up like so. Pop your Sharpie. I'm just going to do 2. Okay. I go 1 here, 1 there, and then make sure you get the back side of it too. Then I'm just going to kind of leave that as is for a second. Let it dry. And this is where I'm going to apply my head cement. Then once this is dried for a little bit, I suggest you take your whip finisher again and go ahead and pull all those materials apart on the front end. So there's your whip finisher, and then so just stick it in there and just kind of pull these apart here. That way they'll dry, it'll end up drying a lot faster too. Then you can see how your barring looked. And you'll really see it once you drop this thing in the water. That's the finished product. I'll tie this same pattern in unweighted depending on where I'm going, but generally whenever I tie for all conditions. Okay, so I'm going to tie some flies that are heavily weighted. I'm going to tie some flies that are small and lightly weighted for clear water, and then some really big, flashy, flamboyant colors for when the water goes south. But this is going to be, for when the water's not super high or not super low, but it's actually just right. It's got a good size and it's got a lot of wiggle. That's the beauty of these flies here. It's pretty simple, one station, a lot of wiggle and a lot of drop. And that's it for that fly. Done.